Admiral Zektar's 6 eyes focused on a holographic display floating before his command throne. The massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion hummed with the power of 1,000 suns, its weapons systems capable of cracking planets like eggs. Around him, the bridge crew of various alien species worked in hushed efficiency, their movements precise and practiced after centuries of conquest. The Galactic Empire had ruled for over 3,000 years. Species after species had fallen before their might, their worlds absorbed, their peoples either enslaved or eliminated. The Empire's military doctrine was simple and effective, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. No civilization had ever withstood more than a few months against their fleets. Admiral called out communications officer Velthak. Her serpentine form coiled around her station. We're receiving the final surrender transmission from the human colony of New Terra. Zektar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Display it. The hologram shifted to show a human male, middle-aged with graying hair and tired eyes. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and smoke drifted behind him. This is Governor Marcus Chun of New Terra. Our defenses have fallen. We surrender unconditionally to the Galactic Empire. The transmission ended, and murmurs of approval rippled through the bridge. Another successful conquest. The humans had lasted exactly 47 days against the Empire's expeditionary force. Longer than most species, but still pathetically brief. That makes 17 human colonies pacified, noted Intelligence Commander Raxol, his crystalline form refracting the bridge's lights. According to our projections, we should encounter their homeworld within 6 standard cycles. Zektar knew that the humans had proven surprisingly resilient for such a young species, but resilience meant nothing against the Empire's might. Their ships were crude, their weapons primitive, their tactics desperate. They fought with a fury that bordered on madness, but fury was no substitute for superior technology and overwhelming numbers. Sir, Velthak interrupted, we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command. Transfer it to my private chamber. Zektar rose from his command throne, his massive form casting shadows across the bridge. At nearly 3 meters tall and covered in chitinous armor that had evolved over millions of years, he was an imposing figure even among the Empire's elite. His species, the Vortaki, had been among the founding members of the Galactic Empire, their natural aggression and tactical brilliance making them ideal military leaders. The private chamber's walls came alive with the image of Supreme Admiral Kethvar, the Empire's highest military authority. Her 4 arms gestured as she spoke, each movement calculated and precise. Admiral Zektar, congratulations on another successful campaign. However, I'm transmitting new intelligence that requires your immediate attention. What intelligence, Supreme Admiral? We've intercepted human transmissions from their inner colonies. It appears they've been holding back. Zektar's eyes widened. Holding back? That's impossible. We've seen their full military response. Desperate attacks, kamikaze runs, every ship they can muster thrown at our forces. That's what we thought. But listen to this. The transmission that followed made Zektar's blood run cold. It was clearly human in origin, heavily encrypted, but cracked by the Empire's best codebreakers. The voice belonged to an elderly human male speaking with calm authority. This is Admiral Harrison of Earth Defense Command. Colonial Defense Forces, you're to maintain the Outer Rim Protocol. Continue standard defensive measures only. Do not, under any circumstances, reveal the existence of the Inner Fleet or the Soul Defense Network. The enemy must continue to believe what they're facing represents our full military capability. Another voice, younger and clearly distressed. Admiral, with respect, we're losing colonies every week. The civilian casualties are mounting. Surely we should. Negative, Commander. The Outer Rim colonies knew the risks when they volunteered for this assignment. Every day they buy us is another day for the inner worlds to prepare. The plan remains unchanged. The transmission cut off, leaving Zektar staring at the blank hologram in disbelief. Supreme Admiral, he said slowly, are you suggesting that the human resistance we've encountered so far has been limited? Not limited, Admiral. Deliberately restrained. Our xenobiologists have been analyzing human psychology and military doctrine based on their historical records. These creatures are far more dangerous than we initially assessed. Kethvar gestured, and new data streams began flowing across the display. Humans have a concept they call total war, the complete mobilization of an entire civilization's resources for military purposes. Based on our analysis of their homeworld's industrial capacity and population, what we've faced so far represents less than 3% of their potential military output. 3%. The number hit Zektar like a physical blow. If the humans had been holding back, if what they'd faced was merely a fraction of humanity's true strength. There's more, Kethvar continued. We've detected massive construction projects in the human home system. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Whatever they're building in the Sol system, it's big enough to register on our long-range sensors from 12 light-years away. Orders, Supreme Admiral, continue the campaign, but proceed with extreme caution. I'm sending you additional fleet elements and authorization to use Class A weaponry, if necessary. We need to reach the human homeworld and assess their true capabilities before they can fully mobilize. The transmission ended, leaving Zektar alone with his thoughts. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something alien and unwelcome, doubt. Back on the bridge, he called up the tactical display showing their current position. 37 light-years from the human homeworld, with 16 more colonies between them and Earth. If the humans were truly holding back, those colonies would likely be much better defended than the Outer Rim settlements. Navigation, set course for the Kepler system. That's where the humans maintain their largest colonial shipyard. Course laid in, Admiral. Tactical, I want a full analysis of our recent engagements with human forces. Look for any signs of restrained tactics or uncommitted reserves. As the massive dreadnought began its journey toward the next target, Zektar reviewed the combat recordings from previous battles. Now that he knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere. Human ships withdrawing, just as victory seemed within their grasp. Fleets that appeared smaller than their industrial capacity should have been able to support. Weapons that seemed almost deliberately primitive compared to some of the more advanced technology they'd glimpsed on human vessels. The humans were playing a game, and the Empire had been dancing to their tune without realizing it. 3 days later, as they approached the Kepler system, the true scope of human deception began to reveal itself. Long-range sensors detected not the modest defensive fleet they had expected, but a massive armada centered around what appeared to be a fully operational battle station the size of a small moon. Admiral, called out his tactical officer, I'm reading over 400 human vessels in defensive positions around the shipyard. These aren't the same class of ships we've been fighting. The energy signatures are significantly higher. Zektar studied the display with growing unease. The human fleet arrayed against them was not only larger than any they'd previously encountered, but the ships themselves appeared to be of entirely different classes. Where before they'd faced what seemed like converted civilian vessels and hastily armed patrol craft, now they saw purpose-built warships that radiated power. Communications, attempt to hail the human commander. The response came quickly, showing a human female in military uniform. Her bearing was professional, her expression calm. This is Admiral Sarachun of the Colonial Defense Force. You are entering sovereign human territory. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. I am Admiral Zektar of the Galactic Empire's 4th Fleet. You will surrender this system immediately, or we will take it by force. The human admiral smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, you should know that what you've faced so far in the outer colonies has been conducted under very specific rules of engagement. Those rules no longer apply. Before Zektar could respond, his sensors officer shouted a warning. Admiral, multiple hyperspace signatures incoming. Something big. The space around the human fleet began to shimmer and tear as massive vessels emerged from hyperspace. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of ships appeared in perfectly coordinated formations. The newcomers dwarfed anything the Empire had seen from humanity before. Kilometer-long dreadnoughts that made Imperial vessels look like children's toys, carrier ships that launched clouds of fighters, and something else that defied classification entirely. My God, whispered his intelligence officer. Admiral, I'm reading energy signatures that are off our scales. Some of these vessels are putting out more power than our entire fleet combined. The human admiral's image reappeared on their screen. Admiral Zektar, you're looking at the 3rd Colonial Fleet, one of 12 such formations currently protecting human space. I thought you should see what humanity looks like when we stop playing defense. Zektar's mind reeled. 12 fleets of this size. The implications were staggering. The Empire's intelligence estimates had been wrong by several orders of magnitude. You see, Admiral Chun continued conversationally, humanity learned long ago that sometimes you have to let your enemy think they're winning. Every colony you've taken, every victory you've claimed, has been teaching us about your capabilities, your tactics, your weaknesses. The display shifted to show recordings from the battles they thought they'd won. But now Zektar could see what he'd missed before. Human vessels deliberately avoiding certain tactical advantages, weapons that fired at reduced power, formations that seemed designed to lose rather than win. The outer colonies volunteered for this mission, Chen said quietly. Every man, woman, and child knew they might not survive. But they also knew that their sacrifice would give humanity the intelligence we needed to end this war quickly when the time came. "This is impossible," Zektar said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't true. Everything made sense now. The desperate tactics that weren't quite desperate enough. The resistance that was just strong enough to seem real. The gradual withdrawal that always left his forces pursuing rather than crushing. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "I'm detecting massive power buildups across the human fleet. Whatever weapons systems they're charging, they're unlike anything in our databases." On the screen, Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. "Admiral Zektar, I'm going to give you a choice that we didn't offer to your predecessors. Withdraw your fleet from human space. Return the populations you've enslaved, and the Galactic Empire might survive what's coming. Continue your aggression, and humanity will be forced to reveal capabilities that will fundamentally change the balance of power in this galaxy." The threat was delivered calmly, professionally, but Zektar could hear the steel beneath the words. This wasn't the desperate bluffing of a defeated enemy. This was the confidence of a predator that had been playing with its food and was now ready to feed. "I need time to consider your offer," he said finally. "You have 1 hour, Admiral. After that, we stop pretending to be the victims in this war." The transmission ended, leaving Zektar staring at a tactical display that showed his 30-ship fleet surrounded by what appeared to be the most powerful military force he had ever encountered. For the first time in the Empire's 3,000-year history, they were not the predators in this engagement. They were the prey. And somewhere in the depths of space, moving toward the Sol system at the maximum speed his remaining scouts could manage, urgent messages were racing toward the Empire's core worlds. Messages that would transform humanity from a minor irritation on the galactic stage to the single greatest threat the Empire had ever faced. The hour was almost up. Admiral Zektar had made his choice, and it was the wrong one. Pride, the fatal flaw that had driven the Galactic Empire to 3 millennia of conquest, would not allow him to retreat in the face of what he still believed had to be an elaborate bluff. When the hour expired, he transmitted his response to Admiral Chun with all the authority his rank and species could muster. "The Galactic Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. Surrender now, or face annihilation." The silence that followed lasted exactly 10 seconds. Then, Admiral Chen's voice returned, carrying a note of genuine sadness. "I'm sorry, Admiral. You made your choice. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come, assuming any of those academies survived what humanity was about to unleash." The human fleet didn't charge forward with weapons blazing like every enemy the Empire had previously faced. Instead, they simply shifted. Formations that had seemed random suddenly revealed themselves as precisely coordinated geometric patterns. Ships that had appeared to be maintaining standard defensive positions were actually components of a vast three-dimensional array that now hummed with barely contained energy. "Admiral," his tactical officer's voice cracked with strain, "I'm reading power levels that shouldn't be possible. The humans appear to have somehow linked their entire fleet into a single weapon system." On the main display, the largest of the human vessels, a massive dreadnought that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, began to glow with an inner light that grew steadily brighter. But it wasn't just one ship. As Zektar watched in growing horror, he realized that every vessel in the human fleet was beginning to emit the same ominous radiance. "Energy cascade detected across all human vessels," reported his science officer. "They're drawing power not just from their own reactors, but from some kind of network connection. Admiral, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if their entire fleet has become a single weapon. All ships, emergency dispersal pattern, activate defensive barriers, and prepare for..." The command died in Zektar's throat as space itself seemed to ignite. The human fleet fired as one, but what emerged wasn't the familiar lance of plasma or particle beams that characterized normal ship-to-ship combat. Instead, a web of pure energy stretched across space, connecting every human vessel in a pattern that somehow transformed the very fabric of reality. The Imperial ships caught within that web simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized. They vanished as if they had never been there at all. 12 of Zektar's 30 vessels disappeared in the first salvo, leaving behind not even debris to mark their passing. Evasive maneuvers. Zektar roared, but his remaining ships were already moving, their captains driven by the most primal instinct of any living thing, the desperate need to survive. Return fire. All weapons. Maximum power. The Imperial response was everything their doctrine demanded: precise, overwhelming, devastatingly effective. Plasma cannons that could melt continents opened fire in perfect coordination, their targeting systems guided by computers that could track individual particles. Fusion warheads capable of cracking moons streaked toward the human fleet in carefully calculated patterns designed to overwhelm any possible defense. The weapons struck the human formation and accomplished absolutely nothing. Where the Empire expected to see ships breaking apart under impossible stresses, they instead watched their most powerful weapons simply vanish into what appeared to be tears in space itself. The human vessels didn't dodge or deploy conventional shields. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, allowing the Imperial weapons to pass harmlessly through dimensions that no longer applied to them. Impossible, breathed his science officer. They're manipulating space-time itself. Our weapons are being redirected into parallel dimensions where the human ships don't exist. This technology shouldn't be possible for a species this young. But even as the words left his mouth, another salvo from the human fleet erased 6 more Imperial vessels from existence. The energy web was growing stronger, more complex, as if each destroyed ship was somehow feeding power back into the network. Admiral Chun, Zektar transmitted, his pride finally crumbling before the reality of absolute defeat. We surrender. Please, ceasefire. I'm sorry, Admiral, came the response, but you had your chance to surrender. Now we need to make sure the Empire understands exactly what they're facing. The final attack was different from the others. Instead of the reality-bending energy web, the human fleet launched what appeared to be simple missiles, primitive projectiles that any Imperial point defense system should have been able to intercept with ease. Zektar's remaining ships opened fire with every defensive weapon they possessed, filling space with a coordinated barrage that should have vaporized the incoming threat. The missiles passed through the defensive fire without even slowing down. As they approached his flagship, Zektar finally understood what he was looking at. These weren't missiles in any conventional sense. They were somehow existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, following paths through space-time that made them effectively impossible to intercept. But more terrifying than their impossible nature was their obvious destination. They weren't targeting his ships to destroy them. They were targeting them to board them. The first missile struck the Eternal Dominion's main hull and simply phased through the armor as if it wasn't there. Alarms began screaming throughout the ship as something utterly alien materialized in the lower decks. Then another. Then dozens more. Security teams to all decks, Zektar commanded. But even as he spoke, he could hear weapons fire echoing through the ship's corridors. What are we facing down there? The answer came from his ship's security chief, and it made no sense whatsoever. Admiral, the boarders appear to be human. But, sir, they're not wearing environmental suits. They're breathing our atmosphere as if they were born to it. And their weapons, Admiral, they're carrying handheld versions of the same technology that destroyed our fleet. On the security monitors, Zektar could see human soldiers moving through his ship with impossible efficiency. They moved in small teams, clearing each section with tactical precision that spoke of extensive training and perfect intelligence about the ship's layout. But what truly defied comprehension was their apparent immunity to the environment that should have killed them instantly. Human biology was unsuited to the atmosphere aboard Imperial vessels, which was composed of gases that were toxic to most known life forms. The humans should have been dead within minutes of boarding a ship. Instead, they moved with the casual confidence of beings operating in their natural environment. Admiral, One of the humans was speaking directly to him through the ship's communication system, somehow having access controls that should have been impossible for an alien species to understand. This is Commander Rodriguez of the Colonial Marine Corps. Please order your crew to lay down their weapons. We have no desire to cause unnecessary casualties. How are you surviving our atmosphere? Zektar demanded. Genetic modification, Admiral. When humanity learned we'd be operating in environments hostile to baseline human biology, we adapted. Every human in our military forces has been enhanced to survive in any environment known to exist in this galaxy. Your ship's atmosphere is actually easier for us to breathe than what we grew up with. The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. Genetic modification on that scale implied a level of biotechnology that the Empire's own science could barely comprehend. But more than that, it suggested a level of preparation that could only mean one thing. Humanity had been planning for this war long before the Empire had even known they existed. Surrender your ship, Admiral, Commander Rodriguez continued, and we'll transport you and your crew to a safe location. Continue to resist, and we'll be forced to implement Protocol 7. What's Protocol 7? The pause that followed was somehow more terrifying than any weapon Zektar had ever faced. Protocol 7 is what happens when humanity stops trying to minimize casualties, Admiral. It's what we use when diplomacy has failed completely. Through the security monitors, Zektar could see human soldiers throughout his ship, but they were no longer advancing. Instead, they were setting up strange devices at key points throughout the vessel. The devices hummed with the same energy signature as the weapons that had destroyed his fleet. Admiral, his engineering chief reported, voice tight with panic. Those devices are somehow interfacing directly with our ship's power systems. They're drawing energy from our reactors, but I can't determine what they're doing with it. The answer became clear when Commander Rodriguez spoke again. Admiral, those devices are currently mapping every atom of your ship and crew. If activated, they will allow us to reconstruct perfect copies of everything aboard your vessel, including complete psychological profiles of every crew member. We'll have access to every piece of intelligence in your databases, every tactical doctrine in your training programs, and every strategic plan in your command structure. That's impossible. No technology can duplicate consciousness. You're thinking in terms of your own science, Admiral. Humanity has had different priorities during our development. While you focused on weapons and conquest, we focus on understanding the fundamental nature of reality itself. The technology we're using today is based on discoveries that most species won't make for another million years of evolution. Through his ship's external sensors, Zektar could see that similar operations were taking place aboard every surviving Imperial vessel. Human boarding parties had somehow infiltrated his entire fleet simultaneously, using technology that rendered conventional defenses utterly useless. You have 30 seconds to surrender, Admiral. After that, we activate the devices. Zektar closed his eyes, knowing that he faced a choice between certain defeat and the complete compromise of everything the Empire had spent millennia building. When he opened them again, the decision was made. This is Admiral Zektar to all ships. Cease all hostile actions and surrender to human forces immediately. The response from Commander Rodriguez was immediate and professional. Thank you, Admiral. Your crew will be treated according to the standard conventions of warfare. You'll be transported to a secure facility where you'll be held until this conflict is resolved. Commander, I have to ask, how long has humanity been planning this war? Since the day we detected your Empire's expansion toward human space, Admiral. That was about 200 years ago. Everything that's happened since then has been part of our preparation for this moment. 200 years. The number hit Zektar with the force of revelation. While the Empire had been congratulating itself on its inevitable expansion, humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing. Every piece of intelligence they thought they had gathered about human capabilities had been carefully fed to them as part of an elaborate deception that spanned centuries. As human soldiers escorted him from his bridge, Zektar caught a glimpse of the tactical display showing the Kepler system. The human fleet that had destroyed his force was already moving, but not toward the next Imperial target. Instead, they were heading deeper into human space, toward the inner colonies where even larger fleets waited. And beyond them, according to the intelligence reports that were now obviously worthless, lay Earth itself, the heart of human civilization and the source of whatever impossible technology, had just redefined warfare in the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire had encountered an enemy that was not just equal to their power, but so far beyond it that the comparison was meaningless. And worse, they were beginning to realize that what they had just witnessed was not humanity's full strength. It wasn't even close. Supreme Admiral HFY stood before the High Council of the Galactic Empire, her forearms trembling with a rage that threatened to consume her completely. The massive chamber, carved from a single asteroid and decorated with the banners of 3,000 conquered worlds, had never witnessed such a catastrophic report in its 3-millennium history. "You're telling us," Grand Counselor Vexoth spoke slowly, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons, "that an entire Imperial fleet was not just defeated, but completely captured, without a single human casualty." "That is correct, Grand Counselor." HFY's secondary arms gestured toward the holographic display, showing the last recorded images from Admiral Zektar's fleet. "Our analysis of the engagement indicates that the humans were operating with technology at least 500 years ahead of our own, possibly more." The silence that followed was deafening. Around the circular chamber, representatives of dozens of species that had thrown their lots in with the Empire's expansion sat in stunned disbelief. The Vortaki, the Zephani, the crystalline Shardai, the hive-minded Kolthek, all of them had seen their armies sweep across the galaxy with unstoppable momentum. The concept of defeat was so alien to them that many were still struggling to process what they were hearing. "Show us the recordings again," demanded Warprime Thakol of the Zephani. His insectoid features were rigid with concentration. "There must be something we're missing. No species develops this kind of capability in isolation." The hologram shifted, displaying the final moments of the battle in the Kepler system. The council members watched in absolute silence as Imperial vessels simply vanished from existence, their matter apparently translated into dimensions beyond the reach of conventional physics. "Energy manipulation on this scale," observed Chief Science Coordinator Ralesh, her crystalline form refracting the light from the display, "would require not just advanced technology, but a fundamental understanding of reality that our greatest minds have only theorized about. These humans aren't just using advanced weapons. They're reshaping the laws of physics themselves." "The question," Grand Counselor Vexoth said gravely, "is what we do now. Do we commit additional forces to the human front, or do we attempt diplomatic resolution?" "Diplomacy?" Warprime Thakol's mandibles clicked in aggressive dismissal. "We have never negotiated with inferior species. The Empire's strength lies in its absolute commitment to expansion and dominance. To negotiate with the humans now would signal weakness to every world we control." "The humans have already signaled their willingness to negotiate," HFY pointed out. "Before they destroyed Admiral Zektar's fleet, they offered to let us withdraw in exchange for returning the populations we've conquered from their outer colonies." "Unacceptable," declared several counselors simultaneously. "Then what do you propose?" Grand Counselor Vexoth asked. "Because our current intelligence suggests that what we've encountered so far represents only a fraction of human military capability." The chamber erupted in heated discussion as species after species voiced their opinions. Some called for immediate massive military response, the deployment of entire sector fleets to crush human resistance once and for all. Others advocated for a more cautious approach, suggesting that they study human technology before committing additional forces. A few, the more pragmatic voices, quietly suggested that perhaps the Empire had finally encountered a species that was genuinely beyond their ability to conquer. The debate was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the Outer Rim. The image of Fleet Admiral Dokrin appeared in the center of the chamber, his reptilian features twisted with what could only be described as terror. "High Council, I'm transmitting from the Arcturus sector. The humans have launched what appears to be a major offensive operation. We're facing forces unlike anything described in previous reports." "Show us," commanded HFY. The tactical display that followed defied comprehension. Where Admiral Zektar had faced hundreds of human vessels, Admiral Dokrin was reporting contacts numbering in the tens of thousands. The ships themselves appear to be of entirely new classes, massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the Imperial fleet, accompanied by smaller craft that moved with impossible precision and coordination. "Admiral," Grand Counselor Vexoth addressed the image directly, "what is your current tactical assessment?" "Grand Counselor, we're not engaged in a battle. We're witnessing what appears to be a systematic demonstration of human military technology. They're not attacking our positions. They're simply showing us what they're capable of. As if to emphasize the point, the display showed a cluster of human vessels approaching an Imperial defensive platform that had been considered impregnable. The platform's weapons opened fire, unleashing enough destructive power to sterilize a continent. The human ships didn't evade or defend. They simply absorbed the attack as if it were nothing more than gentle rain. In response, one of the human vessels, a sleek craft no larger than a standard Imperial frigate, generated what appeared to be a miniature star. The artificial sun hung in space for exactly 10 seconds, its light illuminating everything within a light-year radius, before simply winking out of existence. When the sensors cleared, the Imperial defensive platform was gone, along with the dozen moons it had been anchored to. "They're not trying to defeat us," Dokrin continued, his voice hollow with shock. "They're teaching us, showing us exactly how outmatched we are." "What do you mean?" Ketvar demanded. "Every engagement follows the same pattern. We attack with everything we have. They absorb our attack without any apparent effort. Then, they demonstrate a level of destructive capability that makes our weapons look like children's toys. But they're not using that power against our personnel. They're targeting empty space, uninhabited moons, derelict equipment. It's as if they're trying to educate us about the difference in our capabilities without actually massacring our forces." The implications of this revelation sent a chill through the council chamber. The humans weren't just superior in terms of raw military power. They were demonstrating a level of strategic sophistication that suggested they understood the Empire better than the Empire understood itself. "There's more," Dokrin continued. "We've intercepted human communications during these demonstrations. They're recording everything. Our tactics, our weapons performance, our response times. But more than that, they're analyzing our psychology. They seem to understand exactly how we think, how we make decisions, how we process information." "That's impossible," declared Chief Intelligence Coordinator Vashuar. "Our psychological profiles are classified at the highest levels. No external species has ever penetrated our intelligence networks." "Unless," said a quiet voice from the far end of the chamber, "they didn't need to penetrate our networks because they've been studying us for far longer than we've been aware of their existence." The speaker was Ambassador Kelvin of the Shardai, one of the Empire's oldest member species, and among the few voices in the council that consistently advocated for caution over aggression. His crystalline form pulsed with soft light as he continued. "Consider the timeline. The humans claim they've been preparing for this conflict for 200 years. What if they've been observing us for even longer than that? What if they've been watching our expansion, studying our methods, learning our psychology for centuries before we even knew they existed?" "The implications," Grand Counselor Vexoth said slowly, "would be staggering. Indeed, it would mean that everything we know about human capabilities has been carefully curated to give us exactly the impression they wanted us to have. It would mean that our entire campaign in human space has been proceeding according to their design, not ours." The council chamber fell silent as the full weight of this possibility settled over them. If the humans had been manipulating the Empire's expansion for centuries, if everything from first contact to the current crisis had been orchestrated by human intelligence, then the Empire was facing an enemy that was not just technologically superior, but strategically omniscient. "Admiral Dokrin," Kethvar addressed the transmission, "what is your current status?" "The human fleet has established a defensive perimeter around our remaining forces. We're not under attack, but we're also clearly not free to leave. It's as if they're holding us in place while they complete whatever operation they're conducting in this sector." "What operation?" "We're not certain, but long-range sensors are detecting massive construction activity throughout the region. They appear to be building something vast, multiple structures spread across several star systems, all connected by energy patterns we can't identify." "Construction of what magnitude?" "Dyson scale, at minimum. Possibly larger. Whatever they're building, it's big enough to harness the output of entire stars." The council members looked at each other with growing alarm. Dyson-scale construction required the coordination of resources across multiple star systems, technological capabilities that could manipulate matter on planetary scales, and industrial capacity that could only be achieved by a civilization that had thoroughly mastered every aspect of physics and engineering. "How long would such construction take?" asked War Prime Thakal. "Using conventional methods?" "Thousands of years, minimum," replied Chief Science Coordinator Relish. But if the humans possess the technology they've demonstrated in combat, they could theoretically complete such projects in months or even weeks. And once complete? Unknown, but the energy output alone would give them capabilities that we cannot currently comprehend. If they're building what I think they're building, they would have access to power levels that could reshape galactic civilization. Grand Counselor Vexoth stood slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. At over 5,000 years old, he had guided the Empire through its greatest expansions and its most challenging conquests. But nothing in his vast experience had prepared him for this moment. It appears, he said finally, that the Galactic Empire has encountered something unprecedented in our history. A species that is not just our equal, but so far beyond our understanding that we must fundamentally reconsider our position in the galaxy. What are your orders, Grand Counselor? Kethvar asked. Recall all fleets from human space immediately. Implement a full defensive posture around our core worlds. And prepare a diplomatic mission to the human homeworld. The shocked murmurs that followed this announcement quickly gave way to heated protest from the more aggressive members of the council. Grand Counselor, War Prime Thakul's voice carried the fury of his entire species. You cannot be serious. The Empire has never retreated in the face of any enemy. To do so now would shatter our authority across the galaxy. Our authority, Vexoth replied calmly, is meaningless if our civilization ceases to exist. And based on what we've learned today, that possibility is no longer theoretical. Then we fight, declared another counselor. We mobilize every ship, every soldier, every resource the Empire possesses. We show these humans that we will not be intimidated by superior technology. And when we lose, Vexoth asked quietly, when our combined fleets are swept aside as easily as Admiral Zektar's expedition, what then? Do we continue throwing our forces at an enemy that has demonstrated the ability to exist outside the normal constraints of physics? Do we persist until every world in the Empire lies in ruins? The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of a civilization that had suddenly realized it was no longer the apex predator in its environment. The truth, Vexoth continued, is that we have been operating under a fundamental misconception. We believed that military superiority was simply a matter of better weapons and larger fleets. The humans have shown us that true military superiority lies in the mastery of reality itself. They're not playing the same game we are. They're playing a game so advanced that we cannot even comprehend its rules. So we surrender? Asked a bitter voice from the council. We adapt, Vexoth replied. For the first time in our history, we encounter a species that forces us to grow beyond what we have been. The question is not whether we can defeat the humans. The question is whether we can learn from them. As the council session continued into the night cycles, one fact became increasingly clear to everyone present. The age of imperial expansion was over. What would replace it remained to be seen, but whatever came next would be shaped not by the Empire's will, but by humanity's vision for the future of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the depths of space, moving steadily toward the Sol system, massive construction projects continued their work, building something that would redefine the very concept of power in the galaxy. Ambassador Kelvin had served the Galactic Empire for over 2 millennia, representing his crystalline species through countless diplomatic missions across the galaxy. He had negotiated the surrender of prideful warrior races, mediated disputes between civilizations that communicated through entirely different sensory modalities, and overseen the integration of dozens of conquered species into the imperial hierarchy. But nothing in his vast experience had prepared him for the journey he was now undertaking. The diplomatic vessel Concord of Worlds moved through space toward the Sol system under a flag of truce that felt more like a prayer than a guarantee of safe passage. Around him, the ship's crew worked with the nervous efficiency of beings who knew they were sailing into the completely unknown. The usual imperial protocol of approaching alien worlds with overwhelming force had been abandoned entirely. Instead, they traveled alone, unarmed, and entirely dependent on humanity's willingness to honor the ancient conventions of diplomatic immunity. Ambassador, called out Navigation Officer Trellick, her voice carrying an unusual tremor, we're receiving a transmission from the edge of the Sol system. It appears to be from Human Traffic Control. Human Traffic Control? Kelvin's crystalline form pulsed with confused light patterns. No civilization they had ever encountered possessed sufficient space-based infrastructure to require organized traffic management around their homeworld. Display the transmission. The image that appeared was of a human female in what appeared to be a standardized uniform. Her demeanor was professional, almost routine, as if greeting alien diplomatic missions was a daily occurrence. Imperial Vessel Concord of Worlds. This is Sol System Traffic Control. Welcome to human space. Please adjust your course to heading 27 Mark IV and reduce velocity to 0.01 light speed. You will be escorted to Earth by a diplomatic escort squadron. Escort squadron, muttered the ship's captain. Traffic control? Ambassador, what kind of civilization requires traffic control around their homeworld? The answer became apparent as they followed the prescribed course toward the inner system. What they found defied every assumption about human industrial capability that the Empire had developed over decades of conflict. The Sol system wasn't just inhabited, it was alive with activity on a scale that dwarfed anything in Imperial space. Massive orbital installations surrounded every planet, and most of the larger moons, their purpose unclear, but their energy signatures indicating construction on a truly titanic scale. Ships moved along defined traffic corridors in numbers that suggested an industrial base orders of magnitude larger than anything the Empire had imagined possible. Ambassador, the ship's science officer reported, voice tight with disbelief. I'm reading construction signatures that indicate the humans have built the equivalent of several dozen star systems worth of infrastructure just within their home system. The amount of organized matter here exceeds the total industrial output of our entire empire. But it was when they approached Earth itself that the true scope of human civilization became apparent. The planet hung in space like a jewel, but it was a jewel that had been fundamentally transformed by engineering on a scale that challenged comprehension. Orbital rings encircled the globe at multiple altitudes, each ring large enough to house billions of beings. Space elevators stretched from the planet's surface to massive orbital platforms that themselves appeared to be the size of small continents. My God, whispered the captain. How many humans live here? The answer came from their escort squadron, 12 vessels that had materialized seemingly from nowhere to guide them to their destination. The lead ship's communication array came alive with a familiar voice. Ambassador Kelvin, this is Admiral Sarah Chun. Welcome to the Sol system. Current human population in this system alone is approximately 400 billion, with another 2 trillion distributed across our colonized regions. 2 trillion. The number hit the diplomatic party like a physical blow. The Empire's own population, spread across 3,000 worlds, barely exceeded 1 trillion beings total. Humanity had somehow achieved population levels that suggested not just advanced technology, but mastery of resource management and ecological engineering on a scale that no other known civilization had ever approached. Admiral, Kelvin managed to say, we are honored by your escort. The High Council of the Galactic Empire has sent us to open formal diplomatic relations and to discuss the current situation between our civilizations. Understood, Ambassador. You'll be meeting with the Human Diplomatic Council on Luna Station. Fair warning, you may find our approach to interstellar relations somewhat different from what you're accustomed to. As they approached Luna Station, the differences Admiral Chun had warned about became immediately apparent. The moon had been transformed into what could only be described as a diplomatic complex on an astronomical scale. The lunar surface was covered with structures that appeared to represent dozens of different architectural styles, each one clearly designed to accommodate the needs of non-human species. Ambassador, his aide whispered, some of these structures, I recognize the design patterns. They're built to accommodate species we've never made contact with. How do the humans know about civilizations that we haven't encountered? The question became even more pressing when they were guided to their docking facility. The structure was clearly designed to accommodate Shardai physiology perfectly. Gravitational fields adjusted to their home world specifications, lighting attuned to their species' sensory requirements. Even atmospheric composition precisely matched to their biological needs. Ambassador Kelvin, a voice spoke as they disembarked, welcome to Luna Station. I am Dr. Elizabeth Hammond, Director of Interspecies Relations. We've been expecting you. Dr. Hammond was an elderly human female whose calm bearing suggested decades of experience in complex negotiations. But what struck Kelvin most immediately was her casual use of perfect Shardai vocal harmonics. a communication method that typically took other species centuries to master. Dr. Hammond, your linguistic skills are impressive. How long have humans been studying our communication methods? About 4 centuries, Ambassador. We've found that effective diplomacy requires thorough understanding of cultural and biological factors. Shall we proceed to the conference chamber? As they moved through the station's corridors, Kelvin observed other diplomatic delegations from species he didn't recognize. Some appear to be based on entirely different biochemistries, silicon-based life forms, energy beings that existed as coherent plasma fields, creatures whose forms suggested evolution in zero-gravity environments. All of them moved with the easy familiarity of regular visitors to this facility. Dr. Hammond, he asked carefully, how many species maintain diplomatic relations with humanity? Currently active diplomatic relationships? About 3,200. We're in exploratory contact with another 800, and we're aware of approximately 50,000 additional civilizations that we haven't formally approached yet. 50,000. The Empire, in 3 millennia of expansion, had encountered fewer than 500 distinct species. If humanity was in contact with civilizations numbering in the tens of thousands, it suggested an approach to galactic exploration that was fundamentally different from imperial methods. You seem surprised, Ambassador, Dr. Hammond observed. Perhaps you're wondering how we've made contact with so many civilizations without your empire being aware of our activities? The thought had occurred to me. The answer is relatively simple. Where your empire expands through conquest and absorption, humanity has developed methods for establishing contact that don't require military action. We've been exploring the galaxy for over 500 years without making our presence known to species that might view us as threats. The conference chamber they entered was a marvel of diplomatic engineering. The space somehow accommodated the environmental needs of dozens of different species simultaneously. Varying gravitational fields, atmospheric compositions, lighting spectra, and even dimensional frameworks that allowed beings from different space-time configurations to interact safely. Ambassador Kelvin, Dr. Hammond gestured to what was clearly the designated area for Shardai physiology. Please, make yourself comfortable. We have much to discuss. Dr. Hammond, before we begin formal discussions, I must ask, what is humanity's intention regarding the Galactic Empire? That depends entirely on the Empire's intentions regarding humanity, Ambassador. We've demonstrated that we possess the capability to defend ourselves effectively. The question is whether the Empire is prepared to coexist with a civilization that will not submit to conquest. The High Council is reconsidering traditional imperial doctrine in light of recent events. Good, because what you've seen so far of human capabilities represents our defensive posture only. We thought it important that your empire understand that humanity is not a suitable target for conquest before we discuss more substantial matters. More substantial matters? Dr. Hammond activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this wasn't the galaxy as the Empire knew it. The display showed trade networks, communication links, and diplomatic relationships between thousands of civilizations across the galactic disk. The Empire's territory, highlighted in red, appeared as a relatively small cluster of systems surrounded by vast networks of interconnected civilizations. Ambassador, the Galactic Empire controls approximately 0.7% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. The civilizations that humanity maintains relations with account for roughly 34%. The remaining 65% consists of civilizations that have chosen isolation, species too advanced for meaningful contact, or regions where we've agreed not to interfere for various reasons. Kelvin stared at the display in growing shock. The Empire, which had considered itself the dominant force in galactic civilization, was actually a tiny enclave in a vast network of species and cultures that had developed entirely outside imperial knowledge. This is impossible. Our exploration and expansion efforts would have detected such widespread civilization. Only if your exploration efforts were designed to detect civilizations that won't be found. Most of the species we work with have learned to avoid contact with aggressively expansionist powers. Your empire's reputation preceded it across most of the galaxy. Our reputation? As a species that views other civilizations as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. Most galactic civilizations have been watching the empire's expansion for centuries and developing methods to avoid your attention. The implications were staggering. The Empire had been operating under the assumption that they were the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, gradually incorporating lesser species into their domain. The reality was that they had been quarantined, deliberately ignored by civilizations that possessed the technology and wisdom to avoid Imperial contact. Dr. Hammond, what does humanity propose as a resolution to our current situation? Several options, Ambassador. The first is that the Empire can continue its current expansion policies, in which case you'll find yourselves increasingly isolated as more civilizations develop the capability to defend themselves effectively. The second is that the Empire can begin the process of transitioning to a more cooperative approach to interstellar relations. And if we choose the first option, then humanity will be forced to take a more active role in galactic affairs. We've generally preferred to work behind the scenes, helping civilizations develop their own defenses against aggressive expansion. But, if necessary, we can take direct action to protect species that request our assistance. The threat was delivered with the same calm professionalism that Dr. Hammond had shown throughout their conversation, but Kelvin understood its significance. Humanity was offering the Empire a choice between voluntary reform and force containment. What would the second option entail? A complete restructuring of imperial governance to prioritize cooperation over conquest, the release of all enslaved populations, and the establishment of reparations systems for conquered civilizations. And, most importantly, the gradual integration of the Empire into the existing galactic community as a contributing member rather than a dominating force. The High Council would never accept such terms. Then, perhaps the High Council isn't the appropriate governing body for the Empire's future. Ambassador, humanity has been observing imperial civilization for centuries. We understand your political structures, your economic systems, your cultural drives. We know that there are significant populations within the Empire that have never supported the conquest model of expansion. You're talking about revolution. We're talking about evolution, Ambassador. The Empire can change voluntarily, or it can be changed by external forces. But it will change. The age of conquest-based expansion is ending across the galaxy, and the Empire can choose to be part of what replaces it or stand against it. As the conversation continued through the night cycles, Kelvin began to understand that he was not participating in a negotiation between equals. He was witnessing the moment when a vastly superior civilization offered a lesser power the chance to join the galactic community rather than be left behind by it. The most terrifying part was the growing realization that what he had seen of human capabilities was still just a glimpse of their true potential. And somewhere in the depths of space, construction projects continued that would soon reveal exactly what humanity was building for the future of galactic civilization. 6 months after Ambassador Kelvin's return to Imperial space, the greatest assembly in galactic history was taking place in the Alpha Centauri system. Representatives from over 3,000 civilizations had gathered to witness what humanity was calling the Galactic Reformation Council, a diplomatic summit that would determine the future structure of interstellar civilization for millennia to come. Grand Counselor Vexoth stood at the observation deck of the Imperial delegation's quarters aboard the massive diplomatic station that humanity had constructed specifically for this event. The station itself was a marvel that dwarfed anything in Imperial engineering. An artificial world capable of housing millions of beings in perfect environmental harmony, with each section precisely configured to meet the biological and cultural needs of different species. They built this in 6 months, he murmured to himself, watching the constant stream of ships arriving from across the galaxy. In 6 months, they constructed what should have taken us centuries to plan, let alone build. Behind him, the delegation that represented what remained of the Empire's authority prepared for what would either be their integration into galactic civilization or their final marginalization. The events of the past months had made it clear that the Empire's choice was no longer between conquest and cooperation. It was between evolution and extinction. The transformation had begun immediately after Kelvin's return. Within days of his report to the High Council, revolutions had erupted across dozens of imperial worlds as populations that had been enslaved for generations learned that there was an alternative to imperial rule. Species that had been forcibly integrated into the Empire discovered that there was a vast galactic community ready to help them rebuild their independence. But the most shocking revelation had come from within the Empire itself. Intelligence reports revealed that significant portions of the imperial bureaucracy and Even the military had been in secret contact with human intelligence services for decades. The Empire's own administrators had been gradually preparing for the transition away from conquest-based governance, waiting for the moment when change became inevitable. Grand Counselor, Intelligence Coordinator Vashuar approached, his form radiating the nervous energy that had characterized all Imperial leadership since the crisis began. We've received the final agenda for tomorrow's assembly. You need to see this. The holographic display that appeared before Vexoth showed not just the topics that would be discussed, but the detailed proposals that humanity had developed for restructuring galactic civilization. The scope was breathtaking: new frameworks for interstellar law, economic systems based on cooperation rather than extraction, and, most incredibly, technological sharing agreements that would bring every participating civilization up to minimum standards for self-defense and resource management. They're proposing to share their technology? Vexoth asked in disbelief. All of it. Not all of it, but enough to ensure that no single civilization can dominate others through technological superiority. According to the proposals, every species will have access to the basic technologies needed for interstellar travel, communication, and defense. Advanced technologies will be shared based on demonstrated capability for responsible use. And who determines responsible use? A council representing all participating civilizations, with humanity having no more votes than any other species. It appears they intend to create a truly democratic galactic government. The implications were staggering. For 3,000 years, the Empire had maintained its dominance through technological superiority. If every species had access to equivalent technology, the basis for imperial power would simply cease to exist. There's more, Vashuar continued. The humans have also proposed what they're calling the Redemption Protocol, a framework for former imperial species to make amends for conquest activities while transitioning to new roles in galactic civilization. What kind of amends? Massive reconstruction efforts to restore civilizations damaged by imperial conquest. Reparations based on actual productive output, rather than tribute extraction. And, most significantly, the sharing of imperial historical records to help conquered civilizations recover their cultural heritage. Vexoth considered this in silence. The Redemption Protocol wasn't just about making amends. It was about ensuring that former imperial species would spend the next several centuries focused on building rather than conquering. It was a rehabilitation program designed to transform the fundamental nature of imperial civilization. Grand Counselor, another aide approached. You have a communication from Earth. It's from someone called the Human Director General. The transmission that followed introduced Vexoth to a human male whose bearing suggested authority beyond anything he had previously encountered. Director General Marcus Shaw spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Grand Counselor Vexoth, I want to speak with you privately before tomorrow's assembly begins. There are matters we need to discuss that go beyond the formal diplomatic protocols. What matters? The future of the Vortaki species and your personal role in what comes next. Meet me at the observation lounge on level 700 in 1 hour. Come alone. An hour later, Vexoth found himself face to face with the human who appeared to be the ultimate authority behind humanity's galactic strategy. Director General Shaw was an elderly man whose calm demeanor somehow conveyed both infinite patience and absolute determination. Grand Counselor, thank you for coming. Please sit. We have much to discuss and limited time to do it. Director General, my intelligence services inform me that your position doesn't appear in any human governmental structure we've been able to identify. Who exactly are you? I'm someone who has spent the past 4 centuries preparing for this moment. My official title is Director General of the Long-Term Strategic Planning Council, a position that most humans aren't aware exists. I represent the elements of human civilization that think in terms of millennia rather than decades. For centuries? That's impossible. Human lifespan doesn't extend. Human baseline lifespan doesn't extend beyond a century or so, correct? But we've been modifying ourselves for interstellar civilization for quite some time. Some of us have responsibilities that extend beyond normal biological limitations. The casual reference to life extension technology that could span centuries added another layer to Vexoth's growing understanding of human capabilities. If their leadership included individuals with personal experience spanning multiple imperial generations, their strategic planning operated on timescales that no other civilization could match. Director General, What is it you want to discuss? The survival of your species, Grand Counselor. The Vortaki have been the driving force behind imperial expansion for 3,000 years. Your people's natural aggression and tactical brilliance made you ideal military leaders, but those same characteristics make you poorly suited for the kind of civilization we're building. Are you threatening us? I'm offering you a choice. The Vortaki can continue to exist as they are, in which case they'll find themselves increasingly isolated in a galaxy that no longer has use for conquest-oriented civilizations. Or they can evolve. Into what? Director General Shaw activated a holographic display that showed star charts unlike anything Vexoth had ever seen. These weren't maps of the Milky Way. They were maps of distant galaxies, each one marked with notations that suggested ongoing human observation and contact. The universe is far larger than this galaxy, Grand Counselor. There are civilizations out there that make humanity look primitive, and there are threats that require the kind of tactical brilliance that the Vortaki possess naturally. We're offering your species a role as military advisors and strategic planners for intergalactic exploration. Intergalactic exploration? The Milky Way is essentially a solved problem at this point. Within a few centuries, every species in this galaxy will either be part of the cooperative framework or will have chosen isolation. The real challenges lie beyond our local galactic group. The display showed images that defied comprehension. Vast structures spanning multiple star systems, energy patterns that suggested engineering on galactic scales, and what appeared to be evidence of civilization so advanced that their technology was indistinguishable from natural forces. Some of what we've encountered in other galaxies is peaceful, some is hostile, and some operates according to principles we don't yet understand. We need advisors who can think strategically about threats and opportunities that span millions of light years and operate across time scales of millions of years. You're offering us a job. We're offering your species a purpose that matches your natural capabilities while contributing to something larger than conquest. The Vortaki could become humanity's partners in exploring and understanding the universe beyond this galaxy. Vexoth studied the images in silence, beginning to understand the true scope of what humanity had been building toward. The defensive capabilities they had demonstrated against the Empire, the massive construction projects throughout their space, the diplomatic networks spanning thousands of civilizations. All of it was preparation for expansion beyond the Milky Way itself. What about the other Imperial species? Each will be offered roles suited to their capabilities. The Zephani are natural engineers. They'll help with the construction projects needed for intergalactic infrastructure. The Shardai are gifted communicators. They'll assist with establishing contact protocols for truly alien civilizations. Every species that chooses to participate will find their strengths being used constructively rather than destructively. And if we refuse, then you'll be left behind when the rest of galactic civilization moves forward. Grand Counselor, the age of expansion through conquest is ending not because we're stopping it, but because we've found something better. Cooperation allows us to achieve things that conquest never could. As if to emphasize the point, the space around the diplomatic station suddenly filled with activity. Hundreds of massive vessels appeared, but these weren't warships. They were construction ships, each one larger than an Imperial dreadnought, beginning work on what appeared to be a gateway structure of titanic proportions. What is that? Vexoth asked. The first permanent portal to the Andromeda Galaxy. Construction time. Approximately 6 months. Once operational, it will allow instantaneous travel between galaxies, opening up billions of new worlds for exploration and development. The scale of the project was beyond anything the Empire had ever imagined. A permanent gateway between galaxies represented engineering capabilities that approached the fundamental limits of what was possible within known physics. This is what cooperation can accomplish, Grand Counselor. When thousands of civilizations work together, sharing resources and knowledge, we can achieve things that no single species could ever manage alone. The Empire spent 3,000 years conquering individual worlds. In that same time, we could have been building gateways to other galaxies. As the construction continued around them, Vexoth began to understand that this conversation wasn't really about the future of the Vortaki or even the Empire. It was about fundamentally different approaches to existence itself. The Empire had focused on accumulating power over others. Humanity was focused on accumulating capability for everyone. Director General, what happens tomorrow at the Assembly? Tomorrow, we formally invite every civilization in this galaxy to join the cooperative framework. Those who accept will begin receiving the technological and educational support needed to participate in intergalactic exploration. Those who decline will be respected, but left to their own development. And the Empire? The Empire, as a political entity, will cease to exist. But the species and worlds that comprise the Empire will be welcomed as individual participants in galactic civilization. Your people's experience with large-scale organization will be valuable as we coordinate projects across thousands of civilizations. The final day of the assembly arrived with fanfare that could be seen across half the galaxy. The diplomatic station had grown to accommodate representatives from civilizations that were revealing themselves to galactic society for the first time in millennia. Ancient species that had withdrawn for public contact were emerging to participate in humanity's vision for the future. When the final vote was taken, the result was overwhelming. 2,847 civilizations voted to join the cooperative framework, 312 chose to maintain their isolation, and only 23 voted to continue the old system of competitive expansion. The Galactic Empire was not among those 23. By unanimous vote of their own delegation, the Empire formally dissolved itself and requested admission to the cooperative framework as individual species seeking redemption for their past actions. As Vexoth watched the first ships pass through the completed Andromeda Gateway, 6 months later, he reflected on how completely his understanding of the universe had changed. The Empire had thought of themselves as apex predators in a galaxy of prey. The reality was that they had been children playing with dangerous toys while the adults prepared for challenges that spanned the cosmos itself. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Empire. They had obsoleted the very concept of empire by demonstrating that cooperation could achieve infinitely more than conquest ever could. And somewhere in the depths of intergalactic space, new civilizations were already being contacted, new partnerships were being formed, and new projects were beginning that would redefine the meaning of life in the universe itself. The Empire had stared in terror at humanity's power, but what they had seen was just the beginning. What came next would be beautiful beyond imagination.